Earlier on today, we sent GB News' Joe Casper down to Broadcasting House to ask BBC staff as they entered the building, is Hamas a terrorist organisation?
GB News, hi. Do you think Hamas are a terrorist organisation? Do you think the BBC should call them terrorists?
I'd love to get into work where I'm already late.
Thank you.
I've got to go and get my lunch.
GB News, do you think Hamas are a terrorist organisation? Do you think that the BBC should call Hamas terrorists? GB News, do you think that Hamas are a terrorist organisation? Do you think that the BBC should name them a terrorist organisation? Do you think they're wrong to go against the government? They're a proscribed organisation? That's not good enough for the BBC.
Well, we put out a form of words, as you know, that is that Western governments, including the UK, have prescribed Hamas as a terror organisation. We say that every single bulletin. And also all the other broadcasters, Sky, Channel 4 News, ITV News, they have the same position. It's not just the BBC. OK?
Yeah, thank you very much. GB News, do you think that Hamas are a terrorist organisation?
Not getting involved.
GB News, do you think Hamas are a terrorist organisation? Do you think the BBC should call them terrorists? Do you think the BBC should call them terrorists?
Well, not much change out of the BBC, unsurprisingly. Well, right at the moment, the National Jewish Assembly have organised a protest right outside Broadcasting House. And I'm joined by GB News national reporter Theo Chikomba. Theo, what are the scenes down there right now?
Good evening. Well, it's fair to say there are several hundred people who have come for this protest, or you can call it a rally as well. We may be able to show you some of those pictures now. Lots of them started arriving just after 5 p.m. and we've heard from several speakers during that time. But as you pointed out, that there has been this issue about the language which has been used by the BBC when referring to Hamas. They've stayed away from calling them a terrorist group, but instead have said militants, which some people said is not the right way, particularly when BBC broadcast to many people across the country and indeed the world. And information and the right words to use is something that those who are here are saying it needs a change, essentially. But we are kindly joined by Laurence this evening, who was in Israel not that long ago. Laurence, thank you so much for your time this evening. So just tell me about your trip and sort of what you've made of what's happened in the last few days.
We went to Israel to be with our family, and last Saturday morning we were woken up with a siren about 7:30, ran to the safe room. We didn't really know that much about what was happening, and then around the middle of the day we discovered what was happening. It was a Sabbath, it was a festival, a celebration. The mood in synagogue changed in 1 minute, from one of partying to one of saying prayers and psalms. It was unbelievable. In 1 minute the whole atmosphere changed. The news slowly came through about this genocidal army, a terror army coming through. At first it was 300 dead, 400 dead, 500 dead. I think now it's about 1,300 dead. The first day in Tel Aviv we had 5, 6 lots of sirens. We had to run for shelter, including at night with our 3 small grandchildren, who 1, 4 and 6, carrying them under our arms, crying. I wanted to know what was happening. We were there until last Friday, until Wednesday. We went through constant thud of Iron Dome intercepting incoming rockets. They're still coming in today as you're there. There's a warning you can have which tells you when rockets are coming in, the constant noise of that, in Tel Aviv, not that many sirens. We were at the airport, meant to go back on a BA flight, which had to turn around. There was a siren, mad panic as everyone goes into shelter. People could have easily, if someone tripped a stampede, people could have been killed. We were abandoned our flight was cancelled 3 times, and we decided to make our own way home. The 2 of us spent 5 hours on the internet searching for flights. Unfortunately, we got 2 flights to Marseille at 1:25 in the morning. We were on that flight at 5:25 in the morning, literally running all the way and through security to get on the plane. Great to be back home, but we still, if there's a loud noise or something, we still feel a little bit of caution and shock. We heard a noise a bit like a siren, and we both looked to each other and thought, what do we do? We've got two children left there. Our daughter-in-law is a doctor. She was working 24-hour shifts. She was treating unbelievable injuries, including a 7-year-old hit by a rocket in critical condition and treating Hamas terrorists. But why I'm here today, you had the most horrific attack by a terror group. The BBC is the world's most important media company. The world looked to the BBC for guidance, for example. This was a terror attack. The BBC have not had problems calling things terror attacks before. Hamas is a prescribed terror organisation by the British government. Their reluctance to use the word militant really understates it. You get a feeling it's the odd militant doing something. It does give totally the wrong impression. It's the way you frame things, the way you say things makes all the difference. There's been lots of issues on BBC reporting, but this is fundamental. If you don't recognise what happened, you'll never recognise the truth, and you must recognise the truth.
Laurence, thank you so much for your time. Of course, you heard his experience there, his relatives, his families, who he's been with in the last week or so. But when it comes to the issue here, this is what the BBC have said in a statement. We always take our language very seriously. Anyone watching or listening to our coverage will hear the word terrorist used by many, and we attribute it to those who are using it. For example, the UK government. This is an approach that has been used for decades and is in line with other broadcasters. And they also went on to say the BBC is an editorially independent broadcaster whose job it is to explain precisely what is happening on the ground so our audiences can make their own judgment. And it is on that we've heard some senior BBC correspondents say, well, our job is to report rather than giving terms in this case for this story.
No, I know.
And that's an issue that many those who here have an issue with, yeah.
No, Theo, thank you very much indeed. That audience not buying that argument. And you know, you get a Jewish protest and a few hundred people turn up. You get a pro-Palestine march or celebration, whichever it was, and you get 30,000 turn up, which says a lot about how this country is changing. And so